Now, this particular gem comes from a British newspaper called The Sun. And when I last checked, it was quite happy going viral.
Does China owe Britain billions of pounds from its botched reaction to the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, I'm not too sure I'd be using the word botched to describe coronavirus responses if I was living in the UK. I mean, yes, no, you're definitely right. If only China had implemented the British strategy of herd immunity earlier, I'm sure things would have worked out so much better.
How should Britain respond to China in a post-coronavirus world? These are important questions for the West to answer moving forward.
Can we just be honest about our relationship with China? They make cheap stuff. They have cheap labour, and that's why people get their stuff manufactured there.
Matthew Henderson of the Henry Jackson Society believes that China should pay the West for its alleged breaking of international treaties.
Yeah, let's just remind ourselves of the timeline here. On the 9th of January, the WHO issued a worldwide alert. On the 12th of January, China made the genome for the new virus publicly available. About 2 weeks later, the first case was detected in the UK. It wasn't for a further 6 weeks until Britain started taking on social distancing. And the very next day, it went into a nationwide lockdown. 6 weeks between the first case and the nationwide lockdown. Remind me again, how much of this was China's fault?
Based on figures that have been published by the G7 countries concerning what they've already spent on dealing with the pandemic, the cost so far for the G7 adds up to £3.2 trillion, but the scale for the G7 is already massive. And that for the world as a whole will, of course, be greater still.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but the majority of the reason why there was outbreaks in these countries is because of mismanagement of the pandemic within those countries.
Nor do these figures take account of human costs, grief, loss, damage to families, businesses, careers and lives.
Yeah, and if you're assigning blame for this, sure, China bears some fraction of the blame. But the overwhelming majority of it is because the pandemic was mismanaged by the British government.
The Chinese government is a signatory to an international treaty under the World Health Organization called the International Health Regulations, or IHR.
Now, I'm no expert on international law, but I'm just guessing that signing up to a treaty with the World Health Organization doesn't mean that you're liable for trillions of dollars of damage in the event that there's a pandemic.
These were strengthened and rewritten in 2005 after the SARS epidemic, which broke out in China and which the Chinese Communist Party tried to hush up. It rather appears as if no lessons have been learnt and that they have done the same again.
Well, there's elements of truth in there, for the first probably month. That was true, but by mid-January, they'd published the genome of the bloody virus. They had been reported data, which you can't tell is different from any of the other viral outbreaks around the world. And it still took the British government about 6 weeks before it started taking things seriously. I got no love for China, none at all. But I know when someone's looking for a scapegoat to blame all of their own cock-ups on.
They failed to report details of the outbreak on time, accurately and fully. They destroyed samples and evidence. They silenced local experts and closed down research facilities.
Yeah, and on the 12th of January, they published the genome of the virus. That's like 2 months before the British started taking it seriously.
They denied the World Health Organization early access to sites, and they peddled lies instead.
Well, before Christmas, this may have been true, but the data that they reported from mid-January onwards looks indistinguishable from any other viral outbreak that's occurred around the world. In other words, they were publishing the honest spread data from then onwards. Again, about 6 weeks before the British government started taking it seriously. seems like you're kind of reaching here to blame China for your own cock-ups.
And even worse, they continue to conceal vital information on the nature of the outbreak, which the rest of the world needs to understand what we are facing and to plan our own responses.
That's odd. In reality, they'd actually shared enough data that by the end of January, with the genome and the outbreak data from China, the WHO had declared a public health emergency of international concern 6 weeks before the UK government started taking action.
In this way, the Chinese Communist Party has destroyed the world's trust in their commitment to the IHR.
All right, let's just say you're right, that they've totally undermined people's confidence in China to follow some World Health Organization regulations. Why do you think that's actually... Why do you think that means they now have to pay you $2 trillion?
It is quite clear from policy documents that have emerged from within the Communist Party itself that their objective is to overtake the rules-based international order and combat democracy.
What? This is all about ideology. Are you kidding me? What's your proposal here? That they deliberately infected the West so all the people who buy their products would be sick and wouldn't be able to buy their products? I mean, let me just give you a quick reminder of the basic relationship between the West and China. They have cheap labor and a big manufacturing base. So we actually outsource the manufacture of goods to China and they provide us with cheap goods. It's kind of like, what's it called? Capitalism.
Because they see democracy and the liberal rules-based system as a threat to the existence of their party.
Where the hell did this come from? A second ago you were complaining about China didn't tell you stuff quickly enough. How do you get from that to a conspiracy of China to undermine democracy?
Having done that, we must work out the dangers we are already in as a result of these years of naivety and over-optimism. We have allowed during that time the penetration of our economy, our financial services, property market, key national infrastructure.
Well, even if all of that's true, what the hell does this have to do with the coronavirus and China owing us trillions of dollars in money?
We need first to organise effective defences against all of these harms, and then build a bilateral policy that is able to balance harm.
Yeah, I'm beginning to think this had nothing to do with China or the coronavirus in the slightest.
This can only be done in full lockstep with our free world allies, especially the United States and the Commonwealth, but also all friends and allies overseas who are facing a common threat.
Yes, only then, when we're in full lockstep with all of our allies, will we be able to counter coronaviruses that started in China. I mean, can you imagine how much better things would be if the international public health emergency had been declared sooner? Say, for instance, when there were only 5 cases of the coronavirus in the United States. Imagine how much better the US response could have been. Or if that emergency had been declared when there were only 2 cases of the coronavirus in the United Kingdom. Imagine how much more competent the British response could have been.
There will and must be unity and strength, but only when all of us honestly recognise the trouble we are in and where it is coming from.
You don't have the slightest clue. Look, I read extensively over the past quarantine about the timeline of the coronavirus. And if you do that, you'll find back in mid-January, there is one Dr. Fauci. Before he was famous, before he had been in front of the cameras of the mainstream media of the world, sat by the president and all that sort of thing. Indeed, this was released when there was only 1 case of the coronavirus in the United States. And he nails it, right from the very beginning, that the reason that we have these viruses coming out of China is kind of crazy if you think about it, that, you know, they've got this tradition of the live food, whatever. And the practical upshot of this is you get humans and animals living in close proximity to each other. And this is kind of a tradition of theirs, so, you got to be realistic that if some foreigner or World Health Organization came into someone's country and said, this practice has the risk of spreading disease and must stop, well, what if they came into America and says you have to stop smoking because it's going to kill 500,000 people this year? You've got to understand this that if you would find it kind of offensive if that happened to you in your country, that it probably won't go down so well in other people's countries. Now, of course, Fauci was right. And, this is why we got things like SARS, MERS, and now COVID. And so, this was arguably preventable. It was arguably preventable by the Chinese. If they'd actually shut down all these live food markets, then, maybe this is possible. But it's also maybe possible that if there hadn't been so many botched responses around the world, that we wouldn't be in this predicament either. South Korea is a great example. They actually got hit fairly hard by MERS a few years ago, and there's the expression, generals are always fighting the last war. They were therefore fairly prepared for the COVID, as was China. China managed to shut it down fairly successfully too. China looks like it's going to get away with its entire death toll from this virus being less than what you expect the daily death toll in America is going to be in about 10 days' time. So, looked at like that, it's just not productive to pretend that this is all China's fault, right? Each of these countries, if they had acted in a similar fashion to how South Korea had acted, you would be looking at 1/10 of the number of deaths that you're going to get in each of these respective countries. Maybe less. And honestly, I think there are two reasons why there was such a slack response from the West as there was. The first one was people took a first look at it and they said, only kills 1% of the people. And that it doesn't sound that much until you actually have the prospect of this going through your entire population. And if you're America, you're looking at, 3 million dead. Or if you're in the UK, you're looking at 500,000 dead. And then you start to take, but once it actually spread widely in your country, it's a bit late to do anything about it. Now you're into sort of containment and all that sort of thing. The other reason why it wasn't taken as seriously as it should have been taken is people have become inured to what they should take seriously. It's fake news, and who do you trust? Why people have been told for years that shouldn't trust the experts. In fact, it's now Gove. I don't know whether he's acting prime minister or second minister or whatever, but it was one of his phrases going back to the years of Brexit is we've had enough of the experts. Well, if you've had enough of the experts, then why should you pay attention to them now? So, if you found that useful or enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, and Patreon links below if you're interested in that sort of thing. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.